Am I the asshole for setting boundaries with my son's fiancée and refusing to accept her as a family due to her constant manipulation and pressure? Original post. I, 41M, have 2 kids with my ex-wife, 42F, a son John, 22, and daughter Sally, 20. I'm remarried to my wife, 28. I'm very close with my kids. My son is engaged to Abby. She seems nice but has been a bit pushy trying to create relationships with me and my wife, though she's also awkward with her. Abby isn't close to her family. She told us many stories why, and while some of her complaints don't seem awful, it's not my place to judge and I didn't live it so I can't know anyway. We've tried to be welcoming but Abby has forced her way into some family traditions where she wouldn't have been invited, and some where no one outside of a specific family would have. She has been calling Sally sis since they were only dating a few months, has an odd sister/mother-in-law thing she does with my wife, and the one I'm not a fan of, wants me to be like father to her. Not because we've clicked or anything. We are very different people. Not saying that in a bad way, just saying it's not based on how we get along or anything. My kids and I have a tradition when they come over that we have a private catch-up in my office study before they leave, which is now even more important to them because while they both get along well with my wife, they don't want to have personal conversations around her yet. Abby asked if we could talk, and after I explained the tradition, John later asked that I do it, saying she'd never had a caring conversation with her dad. We compromised that I didn't include her in the tradition but did join the 2 of them for coffee and let her talk. Then she started calling me dad. They weren't even engaged yet. John pulled me aside and begged me to give her that. Laid this whole thing on me about me always being the dad she always wanted right in front of her and she just wanted that. Told me she cried watching me and Sally together. She still gives me random hugs. I'm a lucky dad. I didn't like it but I do feel bad so I gave her that. She wants me to walk her down the aisle in the father-daughter dance. I don't want to walk her down, and I walk with a cane so dancing is hard. At my own wedding I only danced twice. John is begging for me to do one, preferably the aisle. They came over Sunday. John and I were talking. I thought to address it, when Ab walked in without knocking, asking if he'd told me yet. I asked what John said she wanted me to say about having a second daughter now in my speech and how I loved her. I just looked at him. She asked if I'd do the walk and dance for Sally. I said of course. She yelled she's my daughter too and I said it will never be the same, Sally is my actual daughter. I tried to explain that I'd talk about her being a happy addition to the family and I love how happy she makes Jack, which I thought was a good compromise, but she started crying. John apologized and they left, but he called me when they were home, nearly begging me to. AITA because I won't lie and say I love her or she's my daughter. Update 1. I had planned on writing this sooner but life got in the way in a couple of really good ways, but people were helpful and asked for updates, and I have a surprise-free day, so here it goes. On Mother's Day my kids and their partners go to visit my ex-wife. So it turns out my ex-wife and Abby are a lot closer than I realized. She calls her mom, which is part of where this comes from. Also apparently my ex has been egging it on. On Mother's Day they were talking about the wedding and I guess whenever Abby referred to me it was his dad. My son apparently told her to let it go, which led to yelling. Abby about deserving to be my daughter, ex telling her that she's right. Son telling her that I am trying and she should be realistic about things. Sally telling her I only had one daughter, which was apparently a response to Abby saying to her that as my daughters, they should be united. According to my son Abby was crying, according to Sally she was crying and yelling and kicked something before going to her room, and Sally told me she went off on her mom, but will not elaborate so I don't know what was actually said. But knowing Sally, hoo boy. Around 2 a.m. I got a text from Sally's partner's phone saying Abby really is great, she hasn't been perfect but you should give her a chance and you will learn to love her. I saw it when I woke up. I tried to text her back but was blocked, so I called Sally but they were driving. They stopped by my place later that day because I am on the way and my daughter prefers my liquor and cooking and they told me about the night before. At the end I asked to speak to her partner alone. I asked if I had done something to upset her. She was confused and I told her I was blocked. She said I wasn't but checked her phone and I was, and I said it was after her message and she asked what message. I showed her, it was not on her phone anymore. At that point we brought in Sally and caught her up, neither of them were happy. A couple of days later, John and Abby dropped by unannounced. Not something we really do in this family, but okay fine, I had mad salmon, does not take long to cook. I cook 2 more, and my wife serves while I make drinks. The entire night was Abby trying to bring up the wedding. John trying to change the subject, Abby not allowing that. We talk logistics because I am helping them get some good deals through some professional contacts I have when finally she just says so I was talking to mom, She said that you can walk me down the aisle and she'll do the dance, or you can dance and she'll walk, it's your call but you need to choose soon. I reiterated that I could not dance. She tried arguing that I had danced a little at my wedding but I made it clear that is different, and did not feel comfortable walking her. She got upset and said, "Mom loves me, why can't you?" I felt bad but couldn't lie. I pointed out that she had John who loved her, my ex-wife, friends, she had people who love her. She said, "But other than ex-wife, those aren't my parents." I said, "Neither am I." She was very emotional so my wife and I gave them a few minutes. My son and I were alone later, he looked exhausted. He said the problem was that after Mother's Day Abby had called Sally and kept saying they are both my daughters, that I did not get to be close with one but not both, and that it was them against me. But at that one Sally cried havoc and let slip the dogs of war. Things were said, grievances were aired. John had to hang up before it got worse, but I guess Abby was shaken but there was a new problem. Abby had decided in her head that I did not mean what I have been saying and was just doing it for Sally. He told me he would handle it. Ron Howard. He did not. So now I get text messages from Abby every couple of days acting like we have a secret relationship Sally doesn't know about. She even called herself my secret daughter and lolled. She invited my wife to lunch, saying 2 out of 3 of his girls going out. She has even started using the pressure of showing up at events like a recent barbecue to play a certain image. She hugs me more and holds it, wants to take pictures with just me or my wife and I but always a few with just me to post with captions I do not like. My wife is getting especially annoyed because of how she is with her. I guess Abby surprised her with Father's Day plans for me that had to be shut down. As it is she still inserted herself into the day, but she has a soft spot for her and when Abby gets emotional she caves. My wife is a sweetheart. I asked him if he was upset with me and he said no, he just wished it was different. He said we're good, but he's worried he and Sally aren't, which is when I took the advice of some people and suggested premarital counseling. He said he would talk about it. Abby is insisting Sally go to her fitting. That shop should pay-per-view that potential Royal Rumble because Sally is not holding her feelings back anymore. I told him Sally loves him and I'll talk to her, but for now it is stressful all around. Abby driving my wife crazy with her ideas for what my girls should be doing, driving me crazy with dad-daughter content, drove Sally to the edge, and oh yeah, last night sent me an email with 3 styles of father-daughter dances and song options, so I'm not feeling any more respected or heard than before. The 6 of us have barely been in the same room in order to let things calm down since Father's Day, which was great until it was a shit show. Sorry this is so long, with all the craziness this is still the abridged version. We are supposed to meet Friday, Sally's partner and I have a bet going about how bad it will go. So onward and upward. I hope you fathers had a less dramatic day than I did and by any chance does anyone know exactly how bad of a crime I need to commit to enter witness protection? Just curious update too. I have gotten requests for updates on my situation, and as I enjoy a refreshing mojito and my wife her mojito, life feels good and the perfect time to amuse the world with my pain and familial drama. Plus a cousin of mine who apparently reads these and knows my situation gave me the convincing argument of dude, you can't keep people hanging. And how can I argue with that airtight argument? I apologize for how long this is, a lot has happened. My wife's pregnancy is going well, keeping her as stress-free and pampered as possible has been my focus. It is such a different experience this time, both because of how much more involved I can be and how much better a relationship I have with my wife than I had with my ex. My daughter Sally has been great, even her partner has been great, helping with the nursery or driving her around when I can't. My wife doesn't know because it is a surprise, but my son has been building a crib for the baby, modeled after the one I built for him and his sister, to show my wife his support. My son is a good man, and he is still in there, he just has a soft spot for Abby. Which I guess gets us to the part of the movie where Godzilla shows up and starts busting up buildings. So I called a family meeting with my kids to talk about the situation. Told John his sister was only doing wedding activities she wanted to and that the guilting request needed to stop, that this was hurting his relationship with his sister. Sally was happy I said it so she did not have to yet again. I told him if he did not stop her from messaging me I would block her with a bluntly honest explanation why. We got a lot out, John seemed to understand but then a few days later they insisted on coming to talk. Sally and I decided we would get everything out. So all of us ate at our place. Abby started in immediately about baby shower stuff and I told that is the kind of thing we wanted to talk about. I told her that I understood she has been trying to fill a hole that she has, that she thought she was getting a father, a second mother, she calls my ex-wife mom apparently, and a sister. I told her it was still possible but that she needed to start listening to us. I told her that for the sake of family we would give her a fresh start, if she agreed that moving forward she would respect our boundaries. My daughter did not love this idea but loves her brother and was willing to try. Abby tried to say that since we were starting over we could define what the relationship would be and just be family. We told her we were not ready for that it needs to happen organically. She got mad that I am closer with my daughter's partner, which is true but we just get along, and that she deserved it for trying so hard. My daughter said something about trying things we actually want. She ran to our bathroom, he ran after her. After a while I checked on him. I could hear her repeating, "This is not what I wanted." My wife, daughter and her partner went out to the patio to give them privacy and salvage the night. After a bit I got a text saying they had just left. I checked in with him the next day and he said they talked more at home and she understood. For a couple of weeks things were good. The text stopped except the occasional wedding question, since it was getting closer. She stopped pushing herself on my wife and Sally, and we thought was involving us in less in wedding planning out of respect, since as it was they only got the venue at the rate they did because of my professional connections and they know I was willing to help but not interested in helping plan, even if I'm good at event planning. But then I got a call from the venue telling me the card I used had been declined. Now this is a specific card I use for big purchases because of the miles, so I knew it had a high limit. That was how I learned that they had changed dates by 2 months despite being informed I would still be out much of the money because it was too close to the date. I was furious. I mean, I have been lucky in life financially but I am not blow off deposits like nothing wealthy. Called my son, said he needed to get his ass to the house, just him. They both came. When they arrived I opened the door, she actually started with, "Dad." I think I just replied, "You have got to be fin kidding me," and walked toward the table. Abby had the nerve to ask where dinner was. My response was not polite as I made it clear that was not why they were here. I hoped my son would not lie to me so I asked what was going on with the venue. She started going into wedding details but my son interrupted to tell me they postponed because my ex-wife was unavailable because of a surgery and he had not told me because he was putting money together to pay the lost money himself, and he had just reached out to guests to let them know. And that is when Abby's mouth opened. "We have extra time to work on our dance." Now during this time my wife came home, and I was walking her toward the bedroom when Abby said that. My pregnant wife with me said, calmly, "I have different feelings about that and will elaborate further shortly," or something like that. Then I laid my wife down and got her water, turned on her symphonic covers of popular songs and walked back to the table and said something like, "You are out of your fee and mind, have you ever been listening?" I made it clear I was done with this nonsense, we all were. And kind of lost it asking she did not hear us last time because her head was up her ass. She was stunned silent, "What a beautiful sound," and looked at me while I, admittedly with little filter, explained what Sally and I thought of our time with her and her attempts to force us to love her without even getting to know us. She started crying and stood up and shouted, "Then what was this even for?" John asked what she meant, if she meant them, and he started to freak out. She was frantic and said she meant delaying the wedding. Because, and I'm pouring another drink to write this, it was a ploy. My ex-wife and her decided if I had more time I would come around. Apparently my ex told her not to worry about the money because I am loaded. She has always been bitter. I make so much more than I did when we were married, as if that is out of spite rather than my career arc. I think she did that on purpose, frankly. But she not only told me that lie, she and my ex told John as well. He was distraught. Repeating "You lied to me," as she tried to spin it, but he was letting it out about how much he has defended her and covered for her, and she lied to him too. She was defensive and blamed my ex for telling her things and me for being stubborn. She yelled, "Why can't I just call him dad?" And finally, after so long, I heard John respond, "Because he is not your effing dad." She started crying and something about his being the one that told she could call me that, and he said he told her she might be able to eventually, but he had told her again and again to slow down. She started sobbing and went to sit on her chair but missed and fell on the floor. Appreciating physical humor to break the tension, I admittedly chuckled and hid my mouth behind my drink. This all led to a lot of sobbing. I said I needed to check on my wife, and as I walked out she was repeating, "I just want him to be my dad too." I came out and he was walking her to the door and apologized. I said not to. They left. He came over a few days later and said they had a long talk at home. He even asked her if she would have dated him if there was never a chance of being in the family. He believed her when she said yes, but she admitted I was a big draw as well. I was the kind of dad she always wanted. My relationship with Sally is what she always wanted, and the way she said it gave John doubts that she loves him for him. I talked about marriage counseling, how his mother and I tried it, and, while it did not save us, it provided clarity and an impartial voice. I pointed out they both like coming to me, but I cannot be impartial, and if they are trying then they need to do it for real. Abby texted asking if I was the one who suggested therapy. I responded with, "Does it matter if John wants to?" She asked why it was so bad. She wants to know what I think, and I just said John is the man whose opinion should matter most to her. They fought due to the text. She agreed to the counseling and the wedding has been postponed. I may have done a dance. So they are in counseling. He said she struggles, but I obviously do not know details. She is pressing for me and Sally to go to a session with her. Sally told her she did not want to hear Sally unfiltered, and I am not interested. Abby has been leaving Sally alone. She stopped texting me except for the occasional general question, which includes some attempt to go deeper. My wife still occasionally spends time with her because she's very into her pregnancy, more so than I like, but it is my wife's call. So that is where we are. Sorry it was so long, but alcohol makes for a poor editor. Update 3. I was told I should do updates here. People have been asking me to, and to get into what went down on Father's Day and at their mother's house. I have been extremely busy these last few months, but am enjoying my temporary unemployment and thought of this account because of the recent Thanksgiving drama. I will do an update and then we'll share what happened earlier. Oh, and to whomever made the joke that Abby finally got me to dance, that made me laugh. I shared that with the family. My time has been largely caring for my wife. I tend to dote, I know. We are having a boy. We are really excited, though neither of us really had gender preference. I have raised both, and both experiences were wonderful. Now we are discussing names, who we are going to honor. I thought everything had been quiet, but recently found my wife crying and found out I was wrong. Given how busy I have been with work, and my wife knowing I would be free again once we got into this month, my wife has kept this to herself. Apparently Abby has been pushing for one Thanksgiving this year. Things have been quiet with Abby. My son said the wedding blowing up woke her up, and that therapy had been helping. But then this. My understanding is that while John has been talking less with his mother because of all that happened, Abby did the opposite. From my wife's telling, Abby dropped by one day with my ex-wife. My wife intensely dislikes my ex-wife because of lies she spread about my first marriage ending due to infidelity with her, despite there being no infidelity and the linear nature of time making it impossible for us to have slept together back then. Before anyone asks, my ex-wife does not actually think there was infidelity. I would get into that, but I am sure I would sound biased. Anyway, my wife looked at our camera app, saw who it was and called my daughter. Apparently the two of them were keeping things from me because I was working 18-hour days and they did not want me dealing with anything else. I wish they had not done that, but I appreciate the thought. I am really lucky to have such caring people around me. My daughter called her mom and said something that made them leave in a hurry. She will not tell me what, but she smiles when I ask. I called John, but he was dealing with some hard work news, so I just was there for him and left the other alone. The next day Abby came back, alone this time. My wife saw it was her and asked her what she wanted through the door. Abby said to apologize. My wife let her in, she is too nice, and after a nice talk Abby asked about the whole family getting together for Thanksgiving. My wife said of course, she assumed as much. A couple of days later in our group chat we were discussing details, who brings what, and Abby asks what else is needed. I say John already committed and she asked what about my ex-wife, what should she bring? In the time I have known Abby she has never made an intentional joke that funny, so I asked what she was talking about and she mentioned the whole family comment, and my daughter and I both asked what made her think we counted her as family. She actually replied, she is my family. I don't have a dad who wants me, just a mom, and my mom deserves to be with family on Thanksgiving. Sally replied, well, we'll miss you and John then. Abby asks how she can say that. Sally asks how she can be so stupid. John says not to call her stupid and I say that is fair, but there is no real way she thought my wife thought she meant my ex-wife. At this point my wife had filled me in. And then, this is so stupid. She uses my son's phone to add my ex-frigging wife to the group chat. She then thanks us for the invitation and asks what she can bring. As I was typing my daughter beats me to it and asks what she thinks she is doing. She knows she is not welcome, but says it less politely. My wife types, you could not have thought she was included when I said family. Abby responded that she was not coming as my family but as hers. Sally let her mom have it, she already is not talking to her much and said if my ex-wife is there then she is not. I mentioned there was never a chance X was going to come and said I understand Abby and John wanting to go to their mom's house so she is not alone. John typed, plans not definite, we'll let you know. He has since told me that he is not going to go to his mom's place but wanted to tell Abby alone first. All I can think about is the comment about not having a dad who wants her, because it means she is still thinking about me as a dad, I believe. Just a negligent one. I mentioned that to my son and he said he noticed it too and had brought it up at therapy, because family is such a frequent topic, though I obviously do not know the details. Wow, I thought this would be brief but that was a lot. I will get into the crazy stories later if there are people seeing this who want me to. I do not know how posting from here works in terms of anyone seeing it, but this has been good to get out. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. Someone needs to explain sunk cost fallacy to John. I genuinely cannot believe he is still with her after the sheer volume of times she has disrespected him, his boundaries, and your family. Maybe this was back in an earlier post, but has anyone really taken the time to reason with him that there are other women out there and he deserves so much better than this kind of relationship? OOP, I had a talk when this started. So did his sister. After the blow-up with the wedding, his sister and I took him out for a game and some time to really talk after. That was when he apparently demanded counseling. I am happy that for now marriage is on hold, at least. He is seeing her a bit more honestly, but is still too optimistic, in my view. OOP needs to let his wife know not to let Abby in when he is not home. OOP. I have asked my wife to never let her in if I'm not here after last time. Well, actually I had already asked her, but after the last incident my wife has agreed. You are exactly correct that she takes advantage of my wife's kindness, though once our boy is here I think she will be very protective and will hold strong. I have told John that Abby will not be holding our baby, at least for the foreseeable future. OOP and his daughter need to have a serious talk with his son about Abby. OOP. His sister and I had a serious conversation with him a little after everything blew up. It seems to be what inspired both his demand for counseling and putting the marriage on hold. He is better about seeing her honestly. His sister said something about Abby having similarities to their mother, which would have been fighting words from anyone else, and I saw the temper that rarely comes out. But then he listened because she clearly put thought into it. I never thought about it. I am proud to have kids smarter than me. I know my boy doesn't come off as a genius in these posts, and fair enough in that department, but professionally he is brilliant. She laid her reasoning out in excruciating detail. He listened though because she was not enjoying it at all. It was sincere. Some seem to have clicked because since that talk he has been different with her. I just am not getting my hopes up. Commenter 2. When two crazies are feeding off each other's crazy, they can start thinking anything is possible. I have a feeling that even if your son leaves her, she's not going to go away peacefully. Her and your ex sound like peas in a pod, unfortunately. OOP, my daughter really went at him pointing out their similarities. She made her case well and thankfully it shook him up.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
I exposed my sister and fiancé's deception at the altar. The wedding they planned to destroy became their undoing. I operate a hotel at one of Boston's most prominent establishments as a 45-year-old woman. I've worked my way up from the front desk to my current position, dedicating the last 20 years of my life to this business. What began as a work to help my sister when our parents passed away has evolved into my identity, my accomplishment, and my haven in a cruel world. Creating moments, planning experiences, and making sure every visitor feels the warmth and elegance that have come to define our brand are all part of managing this hotel, not just keeping an eye on things or upholding standards. 3 years ago, we received our 5th star after I oversaw the restorations, rebrandings, and even a total reworking of the service philosophy. The employees here are like family to me. Many have been with me for more than 10 years, and they have seen me grow from a young, anxious boss to someone they respect and trust. They have helped me through the difficulties of raising my 35-year-old sister Rachel, filling in when she needed me at school functions or during those trying adolescent years when she found it hard to handle our parents' absence. Although Rachel currently works at a nearby cafe, our relationship has always gone beyond sisterhood. I was 25 years old, just starting my management training program, and suddenly in charge of a 15-year-old who had lost everything when our parents perished in that horrible tragedy. I became her best friend, mother, and sister all at once. Her welfare was my top priority in every choice I made and every promotion I sought. Our haven was the hotel. Rachel would complete her homework in my office during school breaks while conversing with the housekeeping staff and picking up French from our seasoned concierge. As she became older, she would assist at the front desk at peak times, and our frequent visitors loved her for her inherent charm. Despite the difficulties of those years, we managed to put a life together out of the pieces of our broken family. I was never interested in romance. Dating felt like an extra hassle between running the hotel and making sure Rachel had everything she needed. There were fleeting flirtations at industry gatherings and sporadic dinners with business associates, but nothing that ever seemed worth pursuing. My employees would make jokes about putting me up, but I consistently refused. I would tell them that Rachel was my child and the hotel was my husband. When 43-year-old Ethan arrived at our hotel 3 months ago, everything changed. The way he viewed everything made him stand out right away, not only because of his custom-made suit or his quiet assurance. The majority of our affluent guests were too preoccupied with their phones or their own significance to pay much attention to their surroundings. Ethan watched. He praised the delicate lighting that took me months to perfect, remarked on the vintage molding we kept throughout restorations, and pointed out the fresh flowers in the foyer. During check-in, he said, "Your attention to detail is extraordinary," his eyes looking directly into my eyes. "Even though I've stayed in hotels all over the world, this one is unique. You can sense the thought that goes into each detail." Those remarks struck a chord with me because they recognized the hotel's thoughtfulness and effort in addition to its beauty. When he inquired about nearby eateries, I found myself offering not only the customary suggestions but also my own personal picks. The undiscovered treasures I came upon on late-night strolls following especially trying days. We fell into what seemed to be a natural pattern throughout his 3-night visit. After his meetings, he would come back to the lobby lounge every evening, where he was in an ideal position to strike up a discussion with me whenever I walked by. He inquired intelligently about my professional background, the hotel's past, and my future goals. Ethan appeared truly interested in every detail. In contrast to most visitors who view such discussions as merely being polite. Instead of doing the customary corporate checkout on his last morning, he left a handwritten message that read, "Your enthusiasm for the place is inspiring. How about we carry on our conversation over dinner?" He gave me his personal phone and said he understood if I wanted to keep connections professional. There's so much more I'd love to learn. I debated whether or not to text him for hours. When Rachel came into my office that afternoon, she saw that I was preoccupied and demanded to see the message. "You have to call him." More excited than I had seen her in years, she exclaimed. "When was the last time someone actually took the time to get to know you, not just your job?" Everything changed after that first dinner. Similar to my enthusiasm for hospitality, Ethan talked passionately about his work in investment banking. Just as I saw the delicate dance of managing a premium hotel, he explained complicated financial tactics in a way that made them sound like art. He listened to my mention of my parents with sincere compassion, offering his own stories of resiliency and loss. Months passed, and our bond grew faster than I should have been concerned, but Ethan made it all seem normal, even inevitable. Always keeping in mind the preferences of my employees, he would surprise me with lunch at work. He demonstrated an amazing recall of every small detail I had shared about Rachel on our weekend excursions, even swinging by to provide encouragement and inquire about her job at the cafe. He informed me, "You're different," one evening as we were strolling around the waterfront. "By now, most people in your situation would be burned out and jaded from dedicating so much of themselves to their families and jobs. However, you've managed to strike a lovely mix between professionalism and sincere friendliness. Finding someone who genuinely appreciates the importance of creating experiences for others is uncommon." 2 months into our relationship, over a private dinner at a fancy restaurant with a view of the harbor, the proposal was made. The ring was exactly what I would have picked for myself, elegant without being garish. As he knelt next to our table, Ethan talked about creating a future together while a string quartet played sweetly in the background. "When you find someone who shares your beliefs and commitment to greatness, why wait? I know this seems fast," he acknowledged. "Allow me to be a part of your universe and assist you in building something even more remarkable than what you have already accomplished." When Rachel learned that she was engaged, her reaction was intense. Tears were running down her cheeks as she gave me a hard hug. "At last," she said. "Someone deserving of you." I was genuinely moved by her excitement as she immersed herself into the wedding planning. We stayed up late talking about specifics and exchanging aspirations and wishes for the future, as if we were teenagers once more. The wedding preparations moved swiftly forward. I deserved to be the focus of attention for once in my life, so Ethan insisted on throwing a lavish celebration. He was comforting when I raised concerns about the expenses. His suggestion was to combine our resources. I saved for our honeymoon and future house, you saved for the wedding. I take it that we are now partners. Rachel insisted on handling a lot of the wedding planning so I could concentrate on managing the business. She managed the guest list, set up samples, and communicated with vendors with a level of efficiency that made me think of myself. "You've taken care of everyone else for so long," she replied. "Let me handle this for you." The hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I walked in the door, the occasional glance between Ethan and Rachel during our family dinners, and the unexpected coincidences of them running into each other when I was preoccupied with work-related emergencies are some of the indications that I chose to ignore. Everything fell apart yesterday. When Ethan hurried off to what he claimed was an urgent client meeting, he left his phone behind and came to my office to discuss final wedding plans. The notifications lit up the screen as the cell phone continued to vibrate with incoming texts. I didn't intend to pry, but I noticed a preview of a message. "My darling, I can't wait until tomorrow. She won't be aware of what struck her. Rachel was the sender. I opened the phone with shaking hands. There was no password security. He never thought I would see it, I discovered later. My world was completely upended by what I discovered. They exchanged hundreds of mails dating back months before I had even met Ethan. In an early communication, Ethan had written, "She's perfect for our plan. Hotel manager, substantial savings, no real relationship experience, plus she trusts you completely." Rachel had even more heartbreaking answers. "She has always put a lot of effort into looking after me. She never established a personal life. This will be far too simple." Everything had been planned by them. It wasn't by accident that Ethan showed up to the motel. Rachel had told him everything about me. Even my favorite wines and my routine. Every chance meeting, every sincere discussion, had been meticulously orchestrated. But their affair was only one aspect of the truth. Ethan's career as an investment banker was unsuccessful. He used credit cards to purchase his luxury suits. His promises of an opulent future were false, and his tales of financial triumph were made up. I was his lifeline as he drowned in debt. Their true strategy was made clear by the messages: utilize my cash to have an extravagant wedding, then during the ceremony, shockingly disclose their affair. They would make fun of me in front of my friends, co-workers, and employees, and I would be left to bear the consequences. With what was left of my money, they would vanish. Something else caught my attention as I read through their exchanges. Notes from Ethan's legal wife, Catherine. She knew who he truly was, unlike me. Arguments concerning unpaid bills, unpaid child support, and his gambling debts filled their texts. Now as the light is rising, my workplace is covered with deep shadows. My hair and makeup crew will be here in a few hours. Rachel is meant to be present, acting as the maid of honor and a loyal sister. Another detail I discovered in their communications is that Ethan will likely be practicing his vows, which I now know were lifted from romantic films, in preparation for his role in this deception. The location, catering and flowers for this wedding cost all of my life savings, which I have been saving for the past 20 years while raising Rachel, sending her to college, and helping her pursue her dream of owning her own cafe. However, a peculiar serenity has descended upon me as I sit here and watch the early morning light dance across the hotel lobby to which I have devoted my life. They believed they were taking advantage of me by betraying my love and confidence. They failed to remember that I wasn't naive to get to where I am now. I've managed one of Boston's most prominent hotels for 20 years, and over that time I've learned how to deal with crises, transform setbacks into opportunities, and, above all, play the long game. I have been on the phone for the past several hours, to my lawyer, who has been diligently documenting everything and preparing the required legal measures. To Catherine, who needs to know what her husband is plotting, and to the hotel security team, who have always been more than just employees to me. They are the family I selected, and they have already taken some action. Today, a very different kind of ceremony will take place in the exquisite ballroom, where I have planned many flawless weddings for other ladies. I will benefit from every detail they intend to use against me. Everything will go exactly as planned, just not in the way they had hoped. This includes the 300 visitors, the costly decor, and the meticulously scheduled timing. I get a little depressed when I see the bridal gown hanging in my workplace because of the dreams it symbolized. However, such fantasies were based on false information. And I've always valued harsh realities over lovely lies. In front of everyone I know and admire, Rachel and Ethan intended to make a scene that would stick in my memory. Their goal was to make my wedding day a grand event. I've worked my entire career planning flawless events, and this one won't be any different. Things won't go as planned for Ethan and Rachel tomorrow. They're going to have exactly what they wanted, a wedding to remember. After all, I've learned one important lesson in my 20 years of hotel management: although the client isn't always right, they always receive what they are entitled to. The city is now painted in tones of gold as the sun has fully risen. Time to get ready for the once-in-a-lifetime performance. They believed they were the show's directors, but they are going to find out who actually controls this establishment. In contrast to them, I never let my audience down. Update. This morning, Catherine showed up at my hotel office. She produced a stack of financial paperwork, including evidence of Ethan's debts, unpaid child support, and the loans he had taken out using their shared assets as security. She was a composed woman in her early 40s with a calm intensity that mirrored mine. She put the documents on my desk and added, "He's been doing this for years." Spread elaborate stories about his wealth, targeting successful women. But this is the first time he's worked with an accomplice. I mentioned Rachel's involvement, and her voice caught a little. The following hour was devoted to going over messages and contrasting timings. The holes in my discovery were filled by Catherine's record. Ethan had a recurring pattern of extravagant credit card purchases, seducing women, and then vanishing with their money. Rachel's involvement, which gave his scam more legitimacy, was the only thing that was different this time. After that, my lawyer showed up and went over everything we had collected. This isn't just fraud, she clarified. She has already prepared emergency petitions to freeze accounts and stop any attempts to transfer funds, saying, "It's a conspiracy. And with the evidence of their planned public humiliation, we can add emotional distress to the charges." Both of them continued to send messages throughout the morning. Rachel texted to say that she was happy to pick up the flowers. Fake concern filled Ethan's voice as he called twice to discuss last-minute plans. Every interaction seemed like a new betrayal when I didn't respond, but I remained silent. A discreet briefing has been given to the hotel staff. The purpose of the security cameras is to record everything. Disguised as service personnel, police officers have been placed subtly throughout the hotel. They are awaiting my cue, prepared to take action as soon as the fraud evidence is made public. Catherine went into further detail about their marriage, including how Ethan would go missing for months at a time and then come back with long-winded justifications and vows to reform. For years, she has been accumulating evidence in anticipation of the ideal time to take action. It was like giving her the last puzzle piece she had been attempting to complete when I contacted her last night. The cosmetics artist set up in my own suite an hour ago. In an apparent attempt to coordinate with Ethan for their big performance, Rachel texted that she would be late. A lovely reminder of how quickly fantasies may be turned into a weapon is the bridal gown hanging, ready. When Ethan's parents first arrived, they had no idea what their son really was. The reporters I reached out to pretend to be wedding photographers, eager to capture every moment. Ethan will not be aware of Catherine's presence until the ideal time, as she will be seated in the front row. The required paperwork has been prepared by her lawyer for prompt action. The frequency of Rachel's messages is increasing, and there is a tinge of anxiety in them. "Are you all right?" she inquires. "You seem distant." If it weren't so terrible, the irony of her worry would be funny. This is the result of 20 years of sisterhood. Though not for the purpose they intended, the location is turning into the ideal stage. Instead, every detail they planned to embarrass me would double as the background for their publicity. When I look at my reflection in the office window, I see someone who has spent decades controlling chaos rather than a victim. They believed they were planning the ideal scam, but they would soon discover who is actually in charge of this operation. Update 1. Just now, the makeup artist completed her job. This isn't the bridal preparation I had envisioned, and every brushstroke serves as a reminder. My mirror displays expertly done makeup and flawless contouring. They expect me to be a blushing bride, and I look just that. When Rachel did show up, she rushed into the bridal room with an armful of flowers and that phony smile that I can now see clearly. She embraced me with what seemed like real warmth and said, "You look stunning." How long has she been this skilled at acting? As I observed her in the glass, she started to fiddle with my veil and talk about last-minute things. As her eyes met mine in the mirror, she remarked, "It's unbelievable that my big sister is finally getting married. You deserve this happiness for everything you've done for me." If it weren't so tragic, her performance as bravado would be stunning. All morning, Ethan has been sending texts that are meticulously crafted to keep up his facade until the very end, such as, "Can't wait to see you, love," and "just a few more hours until forever begins." According to his most recent communication, his parents are excited to have me join their family. The hotel's huge ballroom has been renovated just as planned, with 300 chairs precisely placed, crystal chandeliers glittering, and white roses all over the place. Only a few members of my team are aware of what is actually going to happen, but they work quickly through the preparations. Ethan won't notice Catherine until it's too late because she is already positioned, sitting quietly in a corner. A few minutes earlier, her lawyer showed up with paperwork. The police officers who are pretending to be employees have verified their identities. Rachel never stops attempting to spend meaningful time with me. "Do you recall the time we spent planning your wedding as children?" As she adjusted my clothing, she inquired. She is correct in one regard, this will undoubtedly be more remembered than those childhood fantasies. This is even better than anything we imagined. I can see visitors coming in through the window of the suite, acquaintances I've known for decades, co-workers from the hotel business, and even some of my frequent visitors who have grown to be like family. They're all decked out in their best attire, anticipating a love celebration. Rather, they will witness a very other event. In the foyer, Ethan's parents are welcoming visitors, and his father is gushing over his son's prosperous investing business. Their world will soon fall apart just as thoroughly as mine did yesterday. The string quartet is getting ready and rehearsing in the wedding march, which will never come to its customary end. I just received confirmation from my lawyer that everything is set up. Legally, as soon as Ethan and Rachel take action, a series of unanticipated events will begin. Rachel continues to be the loyal sister by assisting me with my sneakers. She squeezed my hand and asked, "Are you nervous?" I forced a tiny grin, realizing how accurate she was about the gravity of what was about to happen. It's normal to be quiet before such a big moment. We have 30 minutes till the ceremony starts, according to the wedding coordinator's recent signal. Rachel excused herself to inquire about a few things, most likely to finalize plans with Ethan. Today, I'm by myself in the bridal suite, surrounded by the mementos of what ought to have been the most joyous day of my life. They'll discover in half an hour how justified their dread of my attention to detail was. Update 3. I started walking down the aisle as the wedding march got underway. Ethan played his role as the successful, attractive groom filled with emotion as he stood at the altar. The scenario briefly resembled the fairy tale conclusion they had intended to ruin. Rachel, still wearing her maid of honor outfit, came forward as I was halfway to the altar. She said, "I'm sorry, but I can't let this continue." Her voice echoing over the flawless acoustics of the ballroom. "Ethan and I are in love. I'm carrying his child." The audience's gasp was precisely what they had hoped for. Just as expected, Ethan's face changed from that of a stunned groom to that of a regretful lover. I recognized that they had practiced this moment. Their spectacular surprise had been meticulously arranged. Ethan said, walking over to me, "Grace, you've been nice to us, but Rachel and I—" My voice was clear and calm when I interrupted. I motioned toward the rear of the room, and the big screens that had been used for wedding pictures came to life. "Let me handle the announcements from here." The meticulous preparation, the premeditated deception, the jokes about my confidence, and their planned betrayal were all visible in magnified form. Catherine got up from her chair and walked slowly in the direction of the altar. Ethan's expression turned pale. She said, "Hello, darling." Her voice piercing the startled quiet. "Surprised to see your wife here?" There was another round of gasps when the word wife reverberated around the ballroom. The policemen who had been pretending to be employees took their places. With paperwork in hand, my attorney came forward. Financial information started to slide on the screens, the theft, the fraud, the complex strategy they had devised. "Ethan Thompson," declared the lead detective, "you are being held on charges of grand theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Miss Rachel Anderson, please remain where you are." Rachel's expression fell flat. The self-assured smile gave way to fear. She reached for me and pleaded, "Grace, please. You don't understand. He said that once we had your money, we'd be together." Finally expressing my rage, I said, "Once you had my money? You'd run away together, start a new life with the savings I earned while raising you." When Ethan attempted to flee, the hotel security guards were prepared. All the exits were closed. His father got up and demanded answers. He received copies of the evidence, his son's dishonest past and the list of deceived women, instead of replies. Ethan's assets were frozen and divorce papers were served to him by Catherine's lawyer. As the cops carried Ethan away in handcuffs, the visitors watched in stunned silence. Rachel stayed motionless, tears running down her cheeks. She muttered, "What's going to happen to me?" I said icily, "That depends on the district attorney." She was escorted out of the ballroom by 2 officers. The click of handcuffs marked the end of 20 years of sisterhood. My hotel personnel navigated the turmoil with efficiency, guiding guests to the reception area. Surrounded by the flowers and decorations intended for a completely other event, I found myself feeling oddly at ease as I stood in the empty ballroom afterwards. Even while the betrayal still hurt, it was somewhat satisfying to see their well-thought-out strategy fall apart. Catherine's case appeared strong, and Rachel was assisting the prosecution. There would be several courtrooms where justice will be served. A month has passed since the wedding that never happened, because both Ethan and Rachel decided to collaborate with prosecutors after realizing the strength of the evidence against them. The court case proceeded more quickly than anticipated. I was given $50,000 in damages from Ethan by the court, but getting it will be a completely different story. The judge's remarks regarding their plans' premeditation and the breach of family trust were especially severe. Ethan is currently facing criminal charges in 2 additional states, and Catherine's plea for retroactive child support was also successful. Throughout the proceedings, Rachel made multiple attempts to get in touch with me. "I know I can never make this right," she said in one message, "but please, you're the only family I have." I erased all of her messages without answering. The sister I thought I knew, the one I reared, never existed. According to my lawyer, Rachel may be able to avoid jail time by cooperating with the prosecution, but she will probably still be subject to probation and required reparation payments. She used to talk about wanting me to be an aunt someday, so the fact that she is still carrying Ethan's child feels like a cruel joke. Once more, although in a different way, the hotel has turned into my haven. I was really struck by the loyalty of my workers during the entire event. They have surrounded me with a protective circle, answering phones, rerouting intruders, and making sure I can concentrate on what I do best, managing this establishment. Quickly, word got out about the failed wedding and the arrests that followed in the hotel business. Unexpectedly, it has improved rather than harmed my reputation. Takes real strength to handle that kind of betrayal with such dignity, said one of my frequent clients. In a long letter, Ethan's parents expressed their sadness and embarrassment. I turned down their offer to pay for the wedding. Money was never the point of this. It has to do with family and trust. I've already transformed the intended improvements for the honeymoon room into a brand new corporate conference space. I've kept in touch with Catherine, exchanging details on Ethan's current legal issues and offering support for one another's court challenges. She has turned into a surprising ally who genuinely recognizes the extent of his dishonesty. We're both better off knowing the truth, she stated to me, no matter how much it hurts. I still have the bridal gown hanging in my wardrobe. Something prevents me from making the final decision to donate it, even though I should probably. Perhaps it serves as a reminder of what I learned about my own strength rather than what I lost. The woman who purchased that outfit was incredibly naive in her trust. Now the owner, a woman, is aware of this. I've kept Rachel's old room ready for her over the years, and her belongings are still there. I finally packed everything into boxes yesterday and gave a storage firm a call. It will be held for 30 days. I forwarded the information to her via my attorney. Anything left over after that will be donated. The betrayal itself is no longer the most difficult aspect. It's recognizing how poisoned 20 years of recollections have become. Was Rachel constantly playing a part, waiting for the appropriate moment, or was every Christmas picture, milestone celebrated and late-night chat with her genuine? I've returned to my job, finding solace in the well-known routines of hotel management. I'm putting all of my energy into new initiatives and enhancements, and my staff has observed that I'm more focused than ever. I was invited to give a presentation on crisis management at a hotel management conference last week. I hardly recognized Rachel's handwriting when I looked at her signature on the settlement documents this morning. On the other hand, I hardly recognized her anymore. With a few pen strokes, 20 years of sisterhood came to an end. I have lost my anger. Simply fed up with bearing the consequences of what transpired. My true family, my employees and devoted customers, need me, and the hotel needs me. And I simply have to look after myself for the first time in 20 years. I occasionally find myself thinking about Rachel and the unborn kid she is carrying late at night in my office. I know I made the correct decision though, when I think back on the messages I saw, the premeditated betrayal, and the years of deceit. After burning, certain bridges ought to remain ashes.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
My husband finally cut ties with his toxic mom and sister after they demanded we give up our house for my jobless sister-in-law and her family. My in-laws have a very toxic connection with my spouse and it is beginning to ruin my life. Growing up, my husband was my favorite, the golden child, and my mother-in-law was very close to him. Jacob has informed me that because his father was so busy at work, he and his mother spent a lot of time together. However, I've noticed that his sister, Sarah, is not treated equally by my mother-in-law. Although I am confident that my mother-in-law loves both of her children, I have repeatedly observed that she prioritizes my husband. I'm sure Sarah felt the same way growing up, which is why my husband has always attempted to fill the void by being a kind elder brother to her and always being there for her. But the truth is that Sarah and my mother-in-law would sometimes behave in such a ridiculous manner that it crossed the line. For example, when we initially started dating, Jacob, a recent college graduate, and my in-laws, including Sarah, shared a house. My in-laws had offered my husband a totally own level so that he could have his own privacy and welcome whomever he pleased. This is why he would occasionally invite me to his home to spend the night with him. However, several times in the morning, Sarah would storm into our room while we were asleep without knocking. As you may guess, we were not always properly dressed, but she would act as if everything was normal and begin talking to Jacob about utterly random topics. This was very strange for me because I was uncomfortable with her seeing me in my lingerie. Before anyone points out, I absolutely understand that Jacob was living with his family at the time, so I should have expected this, but is knocking on the door before entering really that much to ask? I suppose siblings can be quite close, but she and I didn't know each other very well when Jacob and I first started dating, so I thought it was really rude. Naturally, I spoke with Jacob about it and informed him that I would not be going over unless he installed a lock on his door. He agreed. But as you can guess, Sarah, who attempted to storm into the room the next morning but was unsuccessful, began ranting at us about why the door was locked. She began jiggling and hammering on the door, begging her brother to let her in. Jacob eventually let her in, and she stormed into the room, asking why he had set the lock in the first place. When she recognized me, she pointed to me and began ranting at him, asking if it was because of this skank. I was astonished by how harsh and insulting she sounded. Jacob told Sarah that he wanted to install the door lock, but Sarah was not convinced. She angrily informed him that they were siblings and should not keep any secrets between them. Jacob told her that he had no secrets, and that he had put the lock so she wouldn't barge in when we were asleep, which was quite disturbing. Sarah violently flipped her head towards me and exclaimed that it was all my fault, saying that I was interfering with her and her brother. This was too much for me, as I am generally non-confrontational, so I excused myself to visit the restroom. I could hear her yelling, with Jacob attempting to calm her. When she eventually left, Jacob came in to comfort me. He apologized for her actions and informed me that he would speak with her again so she could apologize to me as well. When I arrived the following weekend, Sarah apologized and offered me a pitiful excuse, claiming that she needed to speak with Jacob urgently and so believed it would be good for me to come in. Jacob forcefully asked her not to bother us again, and she agreed sheepishly. Although this issue appeared to be remedied, it was not the only strange conduct she demonstrated towards Jacob. If Jacob and I differed on something, even something as trivial as movies, and Sarah was around, she would begin telling him that he should date someone with comparable likes, meaning that we were unsuitable for each other. Jacob would give her a condemning look, but she would simply smirk. Another episode was Sarah asking me awkward questions about my background in an attempt to delve into my life. Jacob and I had been open about our past since the beginning, but I didn't feel comfortable addressing it with his sister. Regardless of my thoughts, she would ask me questions like, "Why did your ex break up with you? Were you not suitable for him?" Can make remarks like, "My brother's previous girlfriend was far more attractive than you." All of these queries and comments arose when she and I were alone. I began to suspect that she was trying to play a game with me, bringing me down. I initially kept my lips shut, but as the situation progressed, I had enough. One day, I responded to her taunting by stating, I liked my ex-boyfriend's family better than Jacob's because he didn't have nosy, overbearing family members. Sarah was taken aback by my reply, which temporarily silenced her. Even though Sarah had a strange relationship with my husband, my mother-in-law was no exception. When I first entered Jacob's life, my mother-in-law ignored me, but once she discovered we were serious, she began acting as if I was attempting to steal her son away. She would purposefully ignore me at dinners and family gatherings, as if I did not exist. Jacob saw this occasionally and tried to talk to her, but she never changed. My mother-in-law once referred to me as stuck-up and spoiled, just because my parents put me to a private school while she was a public school teacher. I also know she tried to talk Jacob out of marrying me, telling him he should look for a better spouse. Fortunately, my spouse did not care about her view and proposed to me nonetheless. My mother-in-law and Sarah were shocked to learn that Jacob had proposed. Both contacted me, telling me that it was a horrible decision and that, because Jacob wouldn't listen to them, I should quit the relationship and return the ring. I found this quite strange and declined, stating that they were crossing a line by asking me to do something like that when I loved Jacob and wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. When they realized they couldn't persuade me, my mother-in-law reluctantly changed her mind, telling me that I should strive to be the best wife for him and care for him in the same manner she did for years. I was rather offended, but I tried not to take her remarks too seriously. Sarah, on the other hand, accused me of being a gold digger and claimed her brother deserved someone with higher status. She even threatened to expose me before our wedding so Jacob would not marry me. Following this conversation, I immediately spoke with Jacob about everything. He was taken aback by how disrespectful they were towards me. He challenged them, but my mother-in-law and Sarah continued to believe that I was unsuitable for him. Jacob told me to disregard them, assuring me that he loved me regardless of their opinions. Despite his reassuring remarks, I felt horrible that his own family would not embrace me. Jacob and I had already chosen to pay for our wedding ourselves, so when my mother-in-law offered to cover half of the cost, we politely declined. Despite Jacob's reassuring remarks, I felt horrible that his own family would not embrace me. Jacob and I had already planned to pay for our own wedding, so when my mother-in-law offered to cover half of the costs, we politely declined, with Jacob explaining how hard we had worked to save money specifically for this occasion. Instead of being happy for us, she became even more angry, and she began telling Jacob how sad she was that he no longer needed her. However, Jacob's father appeared to be quite pleased with us. Unlike his sister and mother, his father was very calm and never had any issues with our connection. Since my mother-in-law continued to complain to Jacob, we made a compromise by telling her that we would love for her to organize the rehearsal dinner for us. She agreed, and we appreciated her generosity. However, when the wedding approached, events took an unexpected turn. The first instance came when Sarah invited herself to join us for supper, telling Jacob how much she missed him. Jacob and I were living on our own following our engagement, so we assumed she genuinely wanted to spend time with her brother. We agreed, and Jacob asked me directly if I was comfortable with having supper with her. I reluctantly consented, not wanting to be nasty to my soon-to-be sister-in-law. While we were enjoying our dinner, Sarah abruptly began discussing how much she despised cheating partners, claiming that cheaters were nothing but useless pieces of trash. We stared at her, curious about where she was headed with this. Then, out of nowhere, she looked me directly in the eyes and asked how it felt to be a useless piece of trash. My brow furrowed in perplexity as Sarah began to rant, accusing me of having an affair with my co-worker Zach. Jacob, also perplexed, asked her what she meant by saying. Sarah proudly hauled out photos of me and one of my co-workers, waving them around and claiming that she had caught me red-handed. I knew I'd never been unfaithful to Jacob, so I was curious as to why she assumed I was having an affair. Looking through the photos, they appeared to be entirely innocent. It's true that Zach and I were close co-workers, but only because we started at the same time and helped each other out when we made mistakes, so our manager wouldn't criticize us. Zach even had a girlfriend, which Jacob knew about. I don't have a lock on my phone, and I've always been open with Jacob about all of my colleagues. Sarah had turned these pleasant moments caught in photographs into something they were not. Evidence of a fictitious affair. In truth, they were far from it. Her false charges irritated me since it was obvious she was attempting to damage my reputation and disrupt my connection with Jacob. Before I could defend myself, Jacob, stunned and plainly upset, moved in to help. He questioned Sarah why she was following me around and photographing me with my co-workers in public places without their permission. When Sarah heard this, she began rationalizing her behavior, claiming she simply wanted to investigate me because I was not of their status, and she was scared I was marrying Jacob to steal his money. Jacob told her unequivocally that her charges were false and that she was creating extra drama out of nothing. He tried to reason with her, telling her to stop spreading lies and attempting to destroy our relationship, but Sarah insisted that Jacob open his eyes to the obvious affair that was going on. I also tried to clarify that we were only co-workers, but Sarah insisted on her charges. As her charges grew more serious, the environment became strained. I had had enough and informed her that I was going to make a police report against her for illegally photographing and stalking me. Her look grew terrified as she inquired whether I was serious. I informed her I had all of the evidence. She had purposely tracked me and took these images without my permission, attempting to slander me with ludicrous lies. Sarah stared at Jacob and then back at me, arguing that she did everything to protect her brother and that it wasn't a big deal. She began imploring Jacob to speak with me, worried that if I filed a complaint it would jeopardize her profession and future. I strongly told her that she could only save herself at this time. Sarah inquired what I wanted. I assured her I wouldn't pursue the complaint if she kept away from my life. Sarah had no other option for escaping the situation at that point. She looked to her brother for support, but Jacob defended me, telling her that she should be grateful I was willing to let it go because what she had done was clearly wrong. Sarah reluctantly agreed to stay away from me, and we have not spoken since that day. Jacob still has a relationship with her, but she has never spoken to me again. The second incident occurred shortly before our wedding, at the rehearsal dinner. My mother-in-law, who had insisted on planning the meal, rebuffed our offer of assistance in any manner. She told us that she would take care of everything. However, when we arrived, it was evident that the preparations were far from what we had anticipated. The rehearsal dinner had plastic tablecloths on picnic tables and chilly Mexican food. My mother-in-law was upset throughout dinner, which marred the festive atmosphere. She drank excessively and began behaving inappropriately with the guests, repeatedly stating how she couldn't wait for the wedding to end and how stressful it had been, despite the fact that she had not contributed monetarily or assisted with the planning. Eventually, my father-in-law became irate and escorted her away. Sarah attempted to excuse her mother's actions, but my father-in-law refused to listen. As you might guess, the entire affair was a fiasco, and I began to worry that both my mother-in-law and Sarah would wreck the wedding the next day. That night, Jacob and I had our first disagreement. I informed him strongly that he needed to uninvite Sarah and his mother because, based on their actions, they would surely try to overshadow us at the wedding. My husband angrily protested, promising me that his father would be present and would not allow them to get away with it. Frustrated, I promised that if he didn't uninvite them, there would be no wedding the following day. Jacob was plainly taken aback by my demand, and even knowing how extreme I sounded, I was concerned about what they might do. I did not want to be embarrassed again in front of my family and friends on our wedding day. Jacob definitely lacked firm boundaries, but I hoped that this ultimatum would make him realize how much his family was interfering with our relationship. Thankfully, Jacob understood and made the proper decision. He called his father early in the morning to inform him that his mother and sister were uninvited. Phil didn't appear startled and promised Jacob that he'd make sure my mother-in-law and Sarah didn't show up there unexpectedly. Shortly after our chat with Phil, my mother-in-law and Sarah began contacting Jacob constantly, apparently trying to persuade him to let them attend the wedding. However, Jacob forcefully told them that he did not feel comfortable having them there because of how they had treated me throughout our relationship. Hearing this, my mother-in-law began accusing me of being a terrible influence and interfering with her relationship with her son. Sarah attempted to argue with him, but Jacob was certain in his decision. I felt horrible that Phil couldn't attend our wedding because of his wife and children. I even felt sorry about issuing the ultimatum. But all of my remorse vanished when I discovered from some of Jacob's cousins that Sarah and my mother-in-law had intended to wear white dresses to our wedding. The cousins informed me that in their family WhatsApp group, which only had female members, Sarah had encouraged the others to wear white as well, stating there was no reason for the bride to be the only one. I was astounded by how low they would go just to hurt me. After knowing this, I was relieved they hadn't been invited. Jacob missed his family, but he could see where I was coming from. Overall, we had a lovely wedding, and no one tried to outdo us. Since that day, my mother-in-law and Sarah have stopped talking to me entirely, which I am absolutely okay with. They only invited Jacob around for dinner or special events, which didn't bother me at all. Phil, on the other hand, was always kind to me, and we stayed in touch over the years. Jacob and I painstakingly saved money and finally purchased a new home this year. It was our first home, and we were overjoyed to own something so meaningful. Jacob's parents and Sarah did come to visit for a modest housewarming celebration, but I went to see my parents and spent time with my family instead. Now, to the major point, my mother-in-law contacted me unexpectedly last month. This was really surprising because Mom and I hadn't spoken since the day I married Jacob. Surprisingly, she casually inquired about my well-being and life circumstances. I was taken aback by her unexpected interest, but I responded pleasantly. Then she questioned how it felt to live in such a spacious house with only Jacob and myself. Her remark stung since Jacob and I had been trying to conceive for a long time but were unable to do so owing to infertility concerns. Jacob and I had mourned the thought of never having children, but we gradually accepted it. When I first got the news, I informed Jacob that if he wanted to marry someone else and have children, he could divorce me. But Jacob had always stayed by me, assuring me that it was fine to be childless as long as we had each other. Our families were aware of this, so my mother-in-law's comment was very painful. She then told me Sarah was pregnant again. I was astonished because this would be her 6th child. Jacob had told me how her husband was unemployed and did not believe in using contraception, which resulted in these accidental pregnancies. Sarah's boyfriend was the embodiment of laziness, doing nothing around the house to aid her or the kids. I've heard from Jacob that he treats Sarah like a personal maid. He never pays any bills in the house. Sarah works many part-time jobs, while he spends the entire day gaming. Regardless of how much everyone has talked to her, Sarah never breaks up with him. My mother-in-law then went on to add that because Sarah could no longer afford to work during her pregnancy, she thought Jacob and I should give up our apartment because it was too big for a childless couple like us. I was caught aback by her demand and struggled to find words. I inquired whether she was joking, but my mother-in-law responded that she was serious, that Sarah and her husband deserved to live in a larger house. However, because she did not have enough space in her own home to accommodate them, she invited them to come in with us. The weight of her news weighed in the air as I fought to keep my composure in the midst of the emotional storm. I emphasized to her that this was our house, which we were still paying for, and the idea of someone else moving in without our permission was intrusive and ludicrous. However, my mother-in-law said that she had already spoken with Jacob, who had allegedly consented to this. This was strange because Jacob and I were always open with each other, and I knew he would have told me if he had agreed to let his sister and her family stay with us. I firmly told my mother-in-law that because the house belonged to both me and Jacob, he couldn't grant permission without my agreement. No one was allowed to reside here unless both of us agreed. To reach a solution, I told her that I would be pleased to accommodate Sarah and her husband for a few days if they wished, but that they could not stay permanently. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, began yelling, arguing that as a responsible daughter-in-law, I was required to make room for Sarah and her husband. She also assured me that if I complied with her demands, all previous troubles would be forgiven. In rage, I cynically said, "Sure, I'll be pleased to let them take our place. But you see, we're still paying for it, and I'm confident that if Sarah and her husband move in, they will not assist with the mortgage or bills. So how about you take some responsibility and contribute to their living expenses? I'd be grateful if you could just cover the mortgage, and we'll manage the rest. Of course, with only one job, you'll definitely need a second one to cover the home payments. Please let me know when you intend to get that second job." Hearing this, my mother-in-law exploded in wrath, shouting and voicing her dissatisfaction. She said it was crazy of me to want her to pay the mortgage, and I responded that it was equally ridiculous for her to expect us to care for Sarah's family and allow them to move in. This infuriated her even more, and she continued to yell, while I smiled with satisfaction. She eventually disconnected the call when she saw I wouldn't give in to her demands. Soon after, Sarah called and yelled at me for daring to ask her mother to pay our mortgage. She went on to add that she had always known I was a gold digger. I informed her that she was the gold digger, attempting to live with us without contributing. I added that if she wanted to know who the true gold digger was, she could look at her own partner, who did nothing to assist her. This appeared to silence her. I firmly told Sarah that she could argue with me all she wanted, but I would never let her family into our home unless they agreed to help with the mortgage. She accused me of being cruel and putting money before family. The tables had turned, and I was relieved at the thought of sticking up for myself and refusing to back down, taking control of my home. However, I feel a little awful thinking about my ex-husband, and I'm here on Reddit wondering if what I've done makes me the villain. Update 1. Thank you to everyone who has expressed their support. To answer the most crucial question that everyone keeps asking, why would my mother-in-law demand such a stupid thing of us? It's because she has always been so entitled. Clearly my husband has tolerated this charade for far too long, and he and I need to sit down and have a serious discussion about it. It's heartbreaking how my mother-in-law can lie about her own kid in order to get her way. My sister-in-law is a pawn in her game, doing whatever her mother-in-law wishes because my mother-in-law has always favored my husband. Sarah simply listens to what her mother says in the hopes of garnering favor as well. In this situation, Sarah stood to benefit because she could rely on us to pay her expenses and care for her children while her useless husband did nothing. I'm waiting for my spouse to return from his business trip so we can discuss. I do not want to discuss this over the phone since it is too important. Update 2. It's been 3 days since I last updated. As I indicated earlier, I was waiting for my husband to return. When he returned, we finally sat down and talked. I told him how his mother had called and demanded that we give up our house to his sister and her family. Jacob was definitely taken aback, so I gave him the whole story. He subsequently said that he had no idea about any of it. Prior to his journey, his mother had only told him that his sister was pregnant. That was all he knew about the situation, and he had no idea his mother would make such unreasonable demands. I informed him forcefully that I expected him to speak with his mother and deal with the matter because I couldn't bear his family anymore. He agreed. Jacob confronted his mother and questioned why she had lied to me about him. When caught red-handed, my mother-in-law attempted to backtrack, claiming that she had not actually lied. She said that she knew Jacob would have no objections to his sister staying with us, so she took matters into her own hands and approached me personally. Jacob stopped her off and questioned why she thought he would be fine with Sarah and her entire family coming in. My mother-in-law explained that because Jacob and Sarah were close, he would naturally want to support her by allowing her family to come in. Hearing this, I closed my eyes in disgust, but remained silent, allowing Jacob to handle his mother. Jacob then firmly told her that he was not going to let Sarah, her unemployed husband, and their 6 children move in with us. He also stated that she had no authority to compel us to take care of them. My mother-in-law started yelling, stating Sarah desperately needed aid at this time. But Jacob informed her it was not our job, and if she wanted to help, she could care for Sarah herself. My mother-in-law then said that Phil didn't want them in their small house, although we lived in a larger house and could easily help out. She even had the audacity to suggest that, since I was childless, assisting Sarah's children would make me feel fulfilled. My eyes widened with surprise, but for the first time, I noticed Jacob's face shift color. He raged at her, stating she had no right to say such rude things about me and couldn't use it to compel me to care for Sarah's children. Jacob went on to say that Phil didn't want anything to do with Sarah since she had turned into a child-birthing machine and that he was over both of them. My mother-in-law tried to backtrack again, but Jacob would not have it. He informed her that he had done his best to keep a positive connection with them, even after they had repeatedly disrespected me, but he couldn't take it any longer. My mother-in-law begged him, but Jacob assured her that this was our home and I was his wife. Anyone that offended me disrespected him as well, and they did not deserve to be in his life. Jacob ended the call with those final words. Since then, he has not spoken with Sarah or his mother. Phil summoned Jacob to speak, and after hearing the entire story, he understood why Jacob had made such a severe move. Phil apologized to me on behalf of his wife, but I informed him that it was not his responsibility. Update 3. It has been an interesting 2 weeks. A lot of people suggested that I install cameras around our house in case my mother-in-law and Sarah wanted to show up and cause a commotion. So I purchased several cameras online and installed them. As luck would have it, they showed up last weekend, banging on my door while I was alone at home. When I saw them through the camera, I quickly called Jacob, who told me he was on his way. I answered the door, and there they were, my mother-in-law and Sarah, both furious. They requested that I let them in, but I refused and told them that if they had anything to say, they could do so from the outside. My mother-in-law began ranting at me, accusing me of being callous, greedy and selfish. I politely informed her that this was our home, and they had no right to enter uninvited. She continued her tirade, unknowing that the cameras were recording every moment. I reminded her of our prior chat, emphasizing that I would not give up our house for Sarah and her family, and that if she had anything else to say, she could wait for Jacob's return. Sarah then began yelling, accusing me of breaking up the family for no reason, being a gold digger and attempting to take her brother away from them. I informed them that everything they said was being recorded and that I would use the footage to obtain a restraining order if necessary. Their eyes widened in surprise as my mother-in-law exclaimed that I wouldn't dare to do that. I smirked and informed her that if they did not leave the property immediately, they would receive a legal notice very soon. This worried them, and Sarah tried to convince me that I was overreacting, saying that it wasn't a big problem. Fortunately, Jacob came at that exact moment. He approached them casually, asking what they were doing. My mother-in-law raced to hug him, but he resisted and forcefully demanded why they had come. Sarah stated that I was attempting to control his life by separating him from them and that they had come to face me. Jacob reiterated that it was his decision to avoid touch, and he did not want anything to do with either of them. My mother-in-law begged for forgiveness, but Jacob merely told them to leave the property or he would call the cops. They were visibly taken aback, apparently not anticipating this reaction from him. Jacob went on to say that if they ever came up at our house again, we would contact the police and have them removed forcibly. They fled, devastated, but Jacob no longer cared. I was relieved that my spouse had finally spoken up for me. Jacob has now spoken with Phil, who was as surprised as we were that my mother-in-law and Sarah had gone behind his back to show up unexpectedly. Phil informed us that we were correct not to let them in and expressed disgust with their behavior. With Jacob being so stern about kicking them out, I doubt they'll dare to return to our property. If they do, I will contact a lawyer right away. I am relieved that my husband has finally learned how toxic his family is, and I hope this is my final update. I'm ready to move on from this circumstance and continue our lives peacefully.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.